never laughing and I won't stop.
Hello guys, so today we did the vocabulary, the short story, and the literary terms. Our essential question for the week is what are some reasons people moved west? And if you take a look at the picture here, you see the black cloud that's behind the truck. It explains to us here that prospectors, when they were going west, panning for gold, that there were people who were moving in search of a better life, and they were trying to run away from the Dust Bowl. This was a area that had a lot of black clouds, and the black clouds rained down dirt and soot onto the land, and it was very difficult for people to breathe. So they were trying to move away from the area that was affected by these dust bowls. All right, our first vocabulary word this week is plunging. If you take a look at the picture, you see the dog is plunging into the lake. He's jumping from the rock into the lake. Plunging means to dive or to move in a downward motion. Okay, prospector. The prospector is the person here who is panning for gold. If you see they have a pan here, and they shake the dirt around in the pan after they remove the water, and they look to see if they can find little pieces of gold. So the prospector carefully panned for gold in the river. Scoffed. Scoff means to make fun of something. Tony's sister scoffed at his dream of being an Olympic athlete. So she's making fun of the fact that he wants to grow up and be in the Olympics. Settlement. This is a picture of a settlement. When the people were moving west, remember the West had not been settled before and no one lived there. So the areas that they went to were not settled. No one was living in the area, and they had to create these makeshift towns that they lived in. They called them settlements. And some people, when they would leave the area, some people would stay and some people would keep going. So some of the settlements were temporary and some of them remained once they left. Okay, so a settlement is when settlers move to an area and they live there. Shrivel. Shrivel. Remember we said shrivel. We talked about how grapes turn into raisins. Grapes left in the hot sun will eventually shrivel up and turn into raisins. Shrivel is when something dries up and shrinks in size. It gets smaller. Okay, like the grape is larger than the raisin. When it starts to dry up, it begins to shrink and becomes smaller. This is called shrivel, when it shrinks and becomes smaller from being dry. The next word is territories. Territories are vast areas of land. We don't hear this word as often anymore because now territories are not open like they used to be. Most places are settled and there's very few areas that are not settled. They use the word territories to describe a large area of land. The pioneers were awed by the size of the territories west of the Mississippi. Okay, I'm sure you've heard this word in social studies before. Now, mostly when they refer to an area, they refer to it as a region. And it's categorized as a region because of the customs and the customs in the area, the weather in the area, the things that they share alike in an area. This is how they determine a region, whereas a territory was an unknown vast area of land at the time. Topple. Topple means to fall over. Here we see a picture of the dominoes, how they're falling into each other and toppling down the line. The line of dominoes began to topple over slowly. Withered. Withered is related to shrivel. Withered means to dry up. But the difference between withered and shrivel is that withered does not shrink in size. Okay? Withered is a dry, when something has dried, but it remains the same size. It does not get smaller. Like the flowers here. The flowers in the field are withered because they don't have enough rain and there is a drought. Do you remember discussing the drought in the story of the buffalo? They have withered, but they are the same size. They have just become very dry. Okay, so withered and shrivel are related. All right, so this week we're reading a tall tale. And I think as you read the tall tale, you might get some idea of why it's called a tall tale. Take a look at the size of the boy in the house and the person next to him, and the chicken that is laying an egg between his toes. All right, my big brother Johnny call. I was just a tadpole of a girl when my family decided to leave the crowded city life behind. My daddy said there are territories out west with wide open spaces. Remember, territories are wide, large areas of land. The Call family needs room to grow. He was mostly talking about my big brother. At 15, Johnny had grown so tall that when he stretched out in bed at night, his head hung out the front door and his feet hung out the back door, all the way into the chicken coop, where the hens laid eggs between his toes. Mama loaded up the wagon with our belongings, and Daddy hitched up the oxen. We began to head west. But it wasn't long until Johnny hollered for everyone to stop. We'll never get there with these slowpokes pulling us, Johnny scoffed. Remember, scoff means to make fun of. So he's mocking the oxen that they're moving too slowly. He unhitched the team and put one ox on each shoulder. So he picked up the two oxen. He picked them up and put one on each of his shoulders and began to walk. Mind you don't let them topple off, Daddy hollered. Remember, topple means to fall. Yes, sir, Johnny said. Tadpole can keep an eye on him. He picked me up and set me on top of his head where I had to hang on to handfuls of Johnny's red hair to keep from falling off. Then Johnny grabbed hold of the hitch and began pulling the wagon. He never did have much sense of direction. He pulled that wagon one way, then the other, faster and faster, digging out the biggest gully you ever saw. The next night, a big rain came and filled it up. I hear that now they call that crooked gully the Call River. So it says that he didn't have much of a sense of direction, and he would pull one way and then the other and faster, and he dug a gully out. The next night when it rained, it filled up the gully, and now they call it the Call River. Johnny pulled our wagon to a Kansas settlement. Remember, a settlement is where people settle. When they moved westward and they had nowhere to live, they would stop and build settlements to stay for a while, where people were trying to figure out how to raise crops. Problem is these mountains, one settler said. They're in the way. Johnny said that was no problem. He saw a big cottonwood tree, used the saw to cut it down, and whittled it into a giant scythe. Next, he whacked the mountains off down near the ground, hauled them west, and piled them up in a big row. Today, folks call them the Rocky Mountains. So he took the scythe and he cut the mountains at the bottom, and he moved them all in a line side by side, and now they're called the Rocky Mountains. Everybody in Kansas was so happy with the nice flat land that they asked us to stay and homestead with them. We built a sod house and started planting wheat. Now, one summer it was mighty dry. All of the wheat had started to shrivel up in the field, so the plants were dry and getting smaller and smaller, shrinking. Our neighbors came and asked for Johnny's assistance. My crop has about withered away to nothing. It has dried up. Almost nothing is left, said one neighbor. Without rain, we're done for. I have got an idea, said Johnny. Looking up at some puffy clouds, he grabbed hold of his big hoe and commenced poking holes in the clouds. Down came the rain in buckets, and the wheat was saved. One morning at the riverbank, Mama was plunging our dirty clothes in the water to get them clean when a prospector rode up. He said he was headed to California to find gold. Plunging, remember, she's putting the water in a downward motion into the river trying to clean it. The prospector is a person who is out looking for gold or other minerals. He said he was headed to California to find gold. Trouble is, he said, there's not one decent trail between here and there. Mama said, "Let me talk to my son." Johnny was known to be able to fix everybody's problems. Johnny was happy to help. For a week he hiked back and forth to all kinds of places, dragging his giant bags of wheat everywhere, clearing trails of trees, brush, and boulders. The Gold Rush folks were tickled to find good, clear paths that they named the Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, and the Chisholm Trail. I'm sure glad our family ended up in Kansas. Our neighbors tell us that this is a bad place for twisters. Twisters are tornadoes. But so far, we haven't seen one. I can't wait though. I can't wait though. Johnny plans to lasso that twister and ride it like a bucking bronco. You know the horses that buck and they try to knock you off the back? He's going to ride the back of the tornado like that. And he's promised he's promised his little sister a ride. So the sister is excited for the tornado to come so she can ride, just like Johnny does. Okay? Now, let's take a look at the literary terms together and we'll discuss the story that we just read when we get to the genre. Visualize. We know that visualize means when we use the details from the story to picture what is happening in our mind. Okay? So the more descriptive the details, the easier it is to imagine. Cause and effect. We know that cause is why something happens and the effect is what happens. Like if the stairs are wet and I fall and I break my leg. The cause is that the stairs were wet and I fell is the effect. Okay? Next we have tall tale. This is the first time we've taken tall tale. A tall tale is a type of a folk tale, and it's a made-up story that features a larger-than-life hero. So the person in the story who's the hero does things that a person can't actually do. His story is exaggerated and made to be something that people are not capable of doing, and you know that when you read it because the things that he does, like when Johnny poked holes in the clouds to make it rain. This is not something that a person can do. Our hero in the story is exaggerated and made to be larger than any person could actually be. All right, now that exaggeration is used to make you pay attention to this part of the story. That exaggeration is used to make the story interesting, and it's used for emphasis so that you notice these stories and that you pay attention to them. This is called a hyperbole. A hyperbole is the use of exaggeration for emphasis. When it talks about Johnny at the beginning of the story, it says that Johnny's so tall that his head hangs out the front door and his feet reach out the back door all the way to the chicken coop. This is to tell you that Johnny is larger than life, bigger than most, okay? Something unbelievable. All right, that's our last literary term for this week. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.